live now. Yeah, it just went.
Well, good evening. I'd like to call to order the Services Committee meeting. First item on our agenda is Fire Marshal Dan Stack's report for the month of January 2019 and the permit report for February 2019. Mr. Stack, for January 2019. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you and good evening, everybody. As you can see, January is a little bit more of a normal month for us. We ran a total, three companies ran a total of 58 calls. 6 of those were structure fires. I mentioned to you back in December we had, I'm sorry, January, we had a working structure fire on January 27th on Park Edge Drive. We responded there at approximately 3:30 in the afternoon, and we went back 2 following times for rekindle. So, other than that, a lot of the other calls were weather related, and no injuries for the fire department or the public to be reported, thankfully. If you refer to the first page at some point, there's some important dates coming up for 2019, including the emergency services. The fire companies decided they wanted to try a family picnic instead of going to either the ball game or Kennywood this year. So we're going to pick a date with that sometime in June, early July, as well as some of the banquet and the golf outing. Fire companies are to have their annual SCBA qualifications on the 26th of March as well as April 1st. And we'll let you guys know if anybody wants to drive by. Let's see, the firefighter physicals have been set. We have 2 dates in cooperation with the Hampton Fire Department. Saturday, March 13th will be held here at Town Hall, as well as Tuesday, April 23rd at the Hampton Fire Department. And then I'm sure you'll talk a little bit further, but the Fire Department Steering Committee met on February the 12th, and a number of agenda items were discussed, including those, the step up the recruitment and retention events, as well as the physicals and upcoming training and such. If you guys have any questions on the report, let me know. If not, that's all I have for the evening.
Thank you, Mr. Stack. Are there any questions from council on the report? Hearing none. Are there any questions from the public? Hearing none, the Services Committee meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Dan.
Call to order the Public Works Committee meeting.
Good evening. You have the February 2019 activity report. I'm not going to go over too much detail. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Okay.
Does council have any questions? Review the bid tabulation for a rental of a .75 cubic yard or larger excavating machine with operator and a high lift with 1.5 cubic yard bucket capacity or larger with operator.
For these bids, this is annual rental of an excavator to do some of the drainage work that we do every year. This year we had 4 vendors that received packets to place bids to look at, and we received 2 bids. Park Edge Excavating, as you can see on your bid tab, was the low bid. He did raise his prices a little bit this year, but remains, as he has for several years, the low bidder.
And review bid tabulation for the town's 2019 paving program.
Okay, I also sent you all a memo on the paving program. We did have $1,750,000 budgeted this year. As you can see, the bids came in a little bit higher. There were a number of reasons for that. The oil prices went up about 8% from our bids from last year, and the contractors in the past, the contractors have always taken milled material that we've removed from the roads, and they've been able to sell it back to the paving suppliers. This year, the suppliers are not offering any money for the millings. They can haul the millings there if they want to, but they're not going to make any money off of it. So that is reflected in particularly the milling price that we received this year. So the bids are a little bit higher. The optional items are, of course, things that we may or may not use. So we can get away, as we did last year, we used a very small amount of the optional items that were in the bid. We may be able to pull the bid down to, or the final price down to $1,750,000, and if not, we do have the ability in the contract to remove one road or more, whatever we need to do to bring it down and stay within the budget.
Any questions from council?
Are we gonna keep, sorry, are we gonna keep some of those millings?
I am, of course, going to try to keep more this year. We're going to need quite a supply as we do Harmony Drive over in Inglemark. We're going to need a lot of millings to do some base repair over there as we do the drainage work. So it's kind of open-ended with the contractors. It's going to cost them money to ship it, to get rid of it. So in talking with Liberoni, I'm going to ask him if he minds if we, I think I put in to keep 7%.
Is it, okay, I couldn't remember.
And I don't think he'll have a whole lot of problem with allowing us to keep more than that because of what it's going to cost him to get rid of it.
Where are you gonna be able to store them?
Probably going to have to be down at Wall Park. That's really the only place we have that we can store some things.
Just piled out in the open?
Back in that spare parking area. We've used that the last couple of years since we had to move out of the back of the stockyard over here.
Mr. Sabino?
Sure.
This equipment, is this additional equipment or is this replacement equipment?
No, that's rental. We get into often through the year jobs that we need an excavator because of the work area that we've got to move around in. So an excavator is a whole lot easier to use than to work on with a backhoe. And so he fills in those times that we need to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Any questions from the public? I'll close the Public Works Committee meeting.
Call the order of the zoning committee meeting for March 11th, 2019. A notification that a public hearing is scheduled for council's regular business meeting on March 25th, 2019, amending Part 13, Planning and Zoning Code of the Codified Ordinances of the Town of McCandless that would modify development standards and add master plan regulations in order to provide for greater flexibility in the use and development of land in the C5 Commercial Residential District, and to allow personal care homes as a permitted use in the C5 Commercial Residential District. An ordinance will be tentatively be considered for adoption at the Town Council's regular business meeting on Monday, April 22nd, 2019. The C5 Commercial Residential District is limited now to, I guess, the property around Blazer, near where the horn of Trader Horn used to be, and you know, the old Walmart site. Is there any questions by council?
I just encourage all stakeholders and surrounding property owners to please come to the public hearing and to get all your questions answered. And make sure that you understand what's going on there. This is your time for your input and to get your questions answered. So I encourage all of those people to please show up at the public hearing.
I think they'll have the ordinance published on beforehand on the website, the town's website. Is that right?
This afternoon.
Oh, this afternoon.
John put it on.
Okay, good. And I think the biggest thing is the addition of personal care homes as a permitted use or, well, conditional use. And reducing the footage, the height of the building from, the height of the building now is, well, it depends on whether the building's, the pitch of the building, but 55 foot would be the highest building it could be on there. Reduced from, was it 85 foot? Yes, sir. Okay. And so you should probably take a look at that. I think, be aware that that C5 area includes the area that's up on the hillside across Blazer and that sort of steep property, so be aware of that. Any questions about Pike?
That master plan section is also all new.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
all
the
new.
master, yeah,
That's
it's,
new too.
yeah, it's very,
If I could just to clarify, are we authorizing that as a conditional use or a permitted use by right?
Permitted use by right.
Okay,
Okay.
so I just want to clarify for the
okay,
council.
permitted use.
Thanks.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Hi, good evening, Marcia Caliendo, Mohegan Avenue. Is this specifically about the Blazier Drive property or all C5 in general?
I think that's the only C5 that's left.
If I may make a suggestion, then I think when the notification goes out, that you specify that this is regarding that proposal that was about a few months ago.
Right,
When
yeah,
they came out.
October, I think October.
Okay, if I may make a suggestion, so people really know where this is, and that this is potentially a resolution, a suggestion, a plan for Blazier Drive, that it's a little bit more obvious than what's written here,
Okay,
because people aren't gonna know what C5 is, the average person.
yeah.
So that's just a suggestion. Thanks.
I think that's a good
Okay,
suggestion. Could we put that in here somewhere, Blazer Drive property?
Yeah, well, we could have it marked on, sort of a count, I mean, sort of a map, something like that. A map would be probably better.
John typically will put a map with the ordinance.
Yeah, they use it for the zoning hearing board.
Yes.
Yeah,
John, we'll get, if John hasn't done that, he'll do it.
okay,
And you're talking about on the website?
On the website, yes, and then
Perfect,
when we do the agenda, we'll clarify.
okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Any other questions? Okay, the zoning committee meeting is hereby adjourned.
Call to order the Public Safety Committee meeting. Report from the chief.
Thank you, Councilman. Good evening. I've been evaluating the department's operations since I've come back. I look enthusiastically to the future with one simple continued goal: to have our police department serve the citizens of our community to the best of our ability every day. I look forward to working with each and every council member in the best interest of public safety for our town as we progress in that direction. We had some training. Sergeant Egley did some active shooter training at some of our nursing homes this month. The training was based on scenarios, and Sergeant Egley is very well versed. He's part of our CERT response team. I want to remind the public that we do for businesses or for anybody openly with, unfortunately, a very intense topic of active shooter. So we'll network that on our Facebook page, but we do training in that, myself and Sergeant Egley. We welcome anybody to call us if we can be of any assistance in any way, shape, or form. We also hosted a tourniquet training that was provided by the Allegheny Health Network. Officers were trained in the use of tourniquets to save lives, and we'd like to thank the Allegheny Health Network for donating the tourniquets to us, and that's also a very, very valuable asset. I respectfully, Councilman Mercer, that's all I have for time.
Thank you. Presentation of amendments to the town code regarding regulation of objects in the right-of-way, in particular signs posted within the right-of-way.
Mr. Betty,
Want me to?
who is, I will begin this subject by saying that Mr. Betty, more or less staffing the subcommittee of myself, Lynn Atman, Dawn, you're here tonight. And we worked together cooperatively, the four of us. Had a couple of different meetings. We also had the solicitor's review. And this is the product of our labors and effort to strengthen our ordinances surrounding objects within that 3-foot buffer zone from the roadway. To clarify that, to also put some additional language in there to allow for the enforcement of the state and county right-of-ways with their permission, and also some due process for when enforcement actions are necessary. But Mr. Betty, I'll let you please just step us through it.
Yeah, appreciate all the work that went into this from Don Miller, Lynn Atman, and Councilman Kirk. And what we did pretty much is modify the ordinance that we already had in place for objects in the right-of-way, and we added signs to that. There is a potential problem, not potential, there's a problem with using the zoning ordinance to remove signs in the right-of-way. And that is because zoning has such a long due process that signs could actually end up being there for probably up to a year, maybe a year and a half. We've got some zoning cases that go for longer than that. So it's a long, arduous process. And not only that, but we get into free speech issues. So in this case, this isn't about signs. It is about objects in the right-of-way. And we are concerned with public safety in this matter. So any signs within 3 feet of the right-of-way, we have the ability to remove them. But we are also acknowledging the property rights of the individuals who want to post signs on their property that aren't in violation of the zoning ordinance. For example, political signs and other signs that are free speech type signs. They just have to be back more than 3 feet from the road right away. So that's what we're doing with this. We are continuing to work on our zoning ordinance. There was a Supreme Court case that one of the Supreme Court justices said that virtually with the decision that the Supreme Court made on zoning cases, that virtually every sign ordinance in the United States was illegal. So we are still working on that. The fallout from that case hasn't been seen yet. This has been going on for 4 years now, I think, 5 years. On the 5th year, I think it's 14.
Yep.
So we're still seeing the fallout from that. But anyways, this isn't all about signs. We're also, we're going to have to continue a discussion with town council for how they want us to, if we are deputized, to remove signs in state right-of-ways. We're going to have to continue this discussion as a policy matter with town council as to how we are going to enforce that on behalf of the state, because we still want to acknowledge property rights at the same time. And it was expressed by council with the last version of this ordinance that there was concern about people putting signs in their front yard on certain state roads that while they may be in the right-of-way, they aren't a safety hazard, and we may not want to enforce those things. Then we want to look at what happens along McKnight Road, which is a limited access highway. So we will have to continue that policy discussion if this ordinance passes. That's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Betty. Would any members of the subcommittee like to add anything to that? Yes, Lynn.
May I come up and just...
Please do.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. I'm Lynn Atman, and I live at 806 Saratoga Drive. I'd like to pass these along just to explain what we did here. I've been concerned about litter in McCandless for some time. On my daily walks, I collect litter as I come across it, and I've participated in 2 town cleanup days to help address the problem. I plan to participate on April 6th as well. Recently, I began contacting PennDOT to ask for assistance with some of the left-behind construction materials on Arcadia Court. When the response wasn't what I hoped for, I reached out to Speaker Turzai at our first meeting back in January, and he asked me to take some pictures of some problem areas to show him. And these are some of the problem areas that a collective group, we took them and gave them to Mr. Turzai when we met. Dave Minard, who is also on the EAC, took about 50 photos of construction debris, litter, temporary signs, and the PG Weekend Edition. I have these photos compiled here if you'd like to see them. On February 27th, several McCandless residents, EAC members, and Councilwoman Zachary attended a meeting at Speaker Turzai's office to discuss the litter problem in the North Hills and some members of PennDOT. The photos were printed out in advance and we presented them to everyone in attendance. Several of us spoke about our litter concerns. We all agreed that litter begets more litter and that it's unsightly and should be addressed. As a group, we identified several sources of litter in our community: garbage trucks, recycling trucks, the PG edition, weekend edition, people littering from vehicles, debris left from accidents, temporary signs that aren't taken down, construction debris, and unsecured loads. Speaker Turzai and PennDOT both agreed to take some steps to improve the situation, and the EAC is working on adopting a lengthy county road in McCandless. Speaker Turzai pointed out that some of the problems fall under the jurisdiction of the town, so I'm asking council to take some steps to address the problem as well. Some ways to do this is stepping up enforcement of existing litter laws, requiring waste management to close the truck lid between residential stops, and working with the North Hills Council of Governments to form a task force to tackle the litter. The matter of temporary signs is before you now. As you prepare to vote for this, please consider there are still political signs from November on our roadways. I'm sure everyone has the best intentions, but they're often left behind in weeds up in the areas where it's hard to get. When they're not taken down, they become unsightly trash. During our cleanup days, they are clogging up storm water drains or tangled in bushes. They may be at the single, they're across the board. I've found all different parties. It's not one party at all. We don't pick on any parties. They're all out there. I personally picked up signs from the candidates, and Speaker Turzai told me that it was okay to pick up some of these from November. As you probably know, Ross Township Commissioners unanimously approved a ban on temporary signs in public right-of-ways. They did this after other methods of encouraging people to take signs down, including a $300 fine or a $100 deposit to put signs up in the first place. The problem was they had limited resources for enforcement. We are a similar sized community with a similar sized town in administration and police force. We would likely face the same issues. One final note, I came home today from work, and the PG edition from my house, from Passavant Hospital to my home, there were 12 papers on the street again thrown. And we also have some business people that throw things in your yard as well. Litter. It's all litter. And we're trying to do the litter cleanup, and this is really not helping us. They're just adding more work for us. So thank you for your time.
Lynn, thanks for your comments. I'll add that there was a press release just yesterday, I believe, from Allegheny County expanding and their Adopt a Highway program in Allegheny County. And ultimately, I think it will require citizen intervention here in some form through a vigorous Adopt a Highway program for town roads as well, perhaps, something our EAC could maybe look at.
I think it's contagious. I think we had
Yes.
35 the first time, we had 75
Yes, it is.
the second time,
You
so
bet.
I hope we have 150
Well, you feel
this
good.
time.
You feel so good when you're done.
Right.
You know? Okay.
Thank you.
Believe that at this time, Steve, if I may just ask if there are any comments and questions from council on this current ordinance as it's draft ordinance as it's rewritten.
9073B, it says a letter, we were supposed to contact PennDOT to get a letter of permission to remove signs on the roadway. Is that happening?
No, it didn't, and the reason it didn't is because we haven't passed this ordinance yet. We're waiting to pass the ordinance before we do that. We have more or less a standing order that we can remove the signs, but given the comments that were made by council at the last meeting when we discussed that, I think we have to have a policy discussion to decide exactly how we're going to do it. How we're going to remove signs on state rights of way, because if we go to like Perrymont, for example, we can't treat Perrymont Road the same way we would treat McKnight Road, because that becomes literally people's front yards, whereas McKnight Road is a limited access highway. So I think we've got to have that discussion before we take any additional steps with PennDOT.
Do we have to have permission from the state to do any of this?
It would be in our best interest, I believe it'd be in our best interest if we did have permission from the state. Right now, the last time I got permission was probably 3 years ago, and I've kept that. But it came from a lower level state employee. It would probably be best if it came from the district executive office. And I think that's where we'll go with it, once we pass the ordinance.
I will add to that there are numerous, I'll call them eyesore areas, publicly owned lands, islands, that this ordinance will give us the ability then to enforce and keep clear for the beautification of the town. And that's again, public land, not private property.
The other, I had a couple of things here, I'll just go through all mine and then whoever wants to. And that is, I'm concerned about our employees, deputized or whatever. Some of these signs are in dangerous places. And so I feel concerned that our employees are parking somewhere and then walking out on close to a highway. I'm thinking of McKnight on that where there's just no shoulder at all and they put those signs halfway up on the hill. And so I'm really concerned about where are you going to park? Somebody else risked their life to put the sign up there, but where are you going to park to safely get that sign down? Because I've taken down some signs myself after the election that somebody put up, and it was not safe at all. So I am reluctant. I feel like that maybe we need something in here to say that if a sign postage is in a hazardous or unsafe area, that the owner of the sign will be notified to come pick it up themselves.
I think that's a great first step. Frequently, the owners can't be contacted, but we try to make that attempt anyways, and frequently it just doesn't happen. When I have picked up signs, we've done it with flashing yellow lights on the vehicle, and it's an emergency vehicle with flashing yellow. But we use the flashing yellow lights. I feel a lot safer doing that rather than using one of the unmarked cars that I would use. So I feel better doing that. But it's still, even at that, stopping on McKnight Road isn't the easiest thing to do. I appreciate your comment.
I will say I believe there is a clause in here related to notification for removal if it's a structure that's not easily removed. I can't find that section, but I think that speaks to what our council president here is referring to as.
Do you remember where that was?
Looking for that here to see.
Yeah.
The notification procedure should be,
I think it's 90704.
7 is, and even, I think even, well, yes, prior to removal. 04 talks about
Signs, objects, or structures that violating cannot reasonably be removed pursuant to 90703.
Yes.
Thank you, Gavin.
Sure. Yes. That's a great point.
And that's what that means?
That's what.
If it's unsafe, that's,
If it's
I
unsafe
didn't understand that.
to remove them,
to mean
then
that.
the owner can be contacted. And again, this doesn't obligate us, it simply gives us the authority to undertake it when it's safe.
Okay.
Are we not able, if we notify someone, they have a sign, they've left their sign up, and we notify them about taking it down, and they don't, is there no way that we can set a fine of some kind?
It's in here.
We have given,
Or do
because.
we do it?
Because signs could possibly be a free speech issue, we are giving a whole lot of due process in this. We can take the sign down. If it is a continual problem where they put it up, we give notification and have to go through a procedure in order to continue to remove it before we start to fine them. We offer to give them their sign back, and we'll hold it for 10 days and then give it back. If they do, or throw it away or give it back if it's a continual violator, we will be able to fine them.
Under that 907.04, the 2 warnings, are those written warnings? And how are those warnings recorded?
The written notice of violation
Okay, because it says 2 warnings, is that 2
yeah,
written or 2 citations, 2 warnings, what does that mean?
Which part are you looking at? The 90704?
A, yes. It's the only sentence not blacked out, not,
Oh, okay,
That's
the
black.
original. Shall be given 2 warnings and a reasonable opportunity to revisit. We have, in our 90703, we have a verbal warning and a written warning that we can give. Gavin, I think we should clarify that in the written warning part.
Let me look at 90703 real quick, Bruce.
and I'd also like to know what a reasonable opportunity is to abate. Is that 1 week, is that 2 weeks, what is that? I think we need some measurable things in here so we can say, this is a reasonable time, or this is not a reasonable time, or you
I
have
agree, there
had
definitely
2
has to be a time
It
limit.
needs to be more defined, or I would like it to see it more defined. Maybe given 2 warnings, 1 verbal, 1 written, I don't know. And reasonable opportunity.
Do we really give verbal warnings?
Well, we don't, I'm trying to figure out what this is, that's what
Right,
we're
but I
saying.
can't believe,
I think it says
I
that.
mean, what, you're stopping and, I would imagine the only people who would give a verbal warning might be the police, if the police showed up at someone's house for a reason.
Well, we're not showing up at anybody, well,
Making calls.
yeah, if we're not really showing up at their house. These are typically signs that aren't signs put up by the resident, the ones that we're talking about. These are,
So you're talking about calling like a particular,
yes,
Mature
go to
schools.
college for free or work for $27 an hour. Or,
yes. Now, if it is something that does appear to have been put up by the resident, we'll try to handle it informally and just say, hey, could you move this back 4 feet right away? For example, a fish fry. My church has a fish fry. And if it's put up within the 3 feet of the road, we'll go knock on the door and we won't remove it. From a policy perspective, we won't remove it immediately. We'll ask the resident, and that wouldn't be a warning, it would just be a request.
And they just have to pull it back.
Yeah.
That's all, they just have to
We
put it out
just-
the right of way.
Yeah, not
If
taking
they
it
didn't
down,
have it,
not taking it
that
down.
it's just not in the right of way.
right,
And
but they
or-
may not have the ability to put it on the, my concern is they don't have the ability to put it that far back and still be able to see it. In particular, if we're trying to push, which I totally disagree with, all the trees, shrubs, and bushes. Because now this says cartway.
Right,
And is that just to the edge of the curb?
yes.
Okay, so it's not the right of way because my right of way is 6 feet past
Definitely,
my curb.
no, we
No,
had
no,
the
sir.
discussion.
Right, and that would be
the
9
directions
feet
we
back.
got at the last
Yeah.
meeting was eliminate that part of it.
Right.
And
so,
this is consistent with the ordinance that's been in effect since 1988, I believe.
We've had that
if we just,
3-foot rule. We just made it more clear as to what the objects in the right of way are.
right, I just know of, I'm imagining there are thousands of houses in violation of plantings within 3 feet of the curb.
And periodically, Public Works goes through and trims them for them.
Right.
And they get a notice about that, much to their chagrin. But people have to be able to see when they're turning right or left, and they can't be blocking the line of sight. It's a safety issue.
It
That's what
really
we're
is
talking about.
Safety and pedestrian access.
Right, that's what we're talking
That's all we're
about.
trying to preserve here.
That's it.
So, and sometimes the chief gets involved when it's within a public road right side triangle. The police get involved and ask them to require them to remove it.
Well, is Cartway, like our street is paved and then it goes up a little bit of asphalt up to the grass itself. Now, is that Cartway?
The cartway is actually where, not the top of the curb, that's a,
Right.
It would be to the cartway, the driving area, so it would be
Okay.
to the base of
Okay,
it.
so that's
Okay.
another
Sorry,
foot
Steve.
less.
Yes, well, yeah.
Or so.
Depends on how you
Right.
measure, yeah.
Should 907.02, should it say public right-of-way, signs in the public right-of-way and town property? In the title, in the title.
Gavin, I'll let Gavin comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine.
I mean, I don't know if that makes a difference or not, because that's what we're talking about, the public,
Clarity, yes.
the public right-of-way.
Yeah, I mean, that's generally what we're referring to when we say right away.
Okay,
But, you know, public to clarify doesn't hurt at all.
okay. All right, that was the end of my suggestions.
Thank you.
Council members, Any other comments on the, Greg? Nothing?
Just,
Joanne, Bill?
just one question on the, on 907.03B, there's reference to an employee, any town employee duly authorized by the town manager. I think that's probably self-evident. If an employee is directed by a superior within the municipality, is that sufficient, or is there some degree of formality beyond that required?
No, I don't think there is any more formality than that. I think as written, you're right, it's
Right.
that employees, and it's usually within the job description. It's a code enforcement officer, it's a zoning officer, whoever's going to be enforcing this ordinance.
So it would
Or the
stop an
police.
employee from just taking down any sign he wanted to.
Right. Now keep in mind too, if there's
I'm sure it's happened.
if there's an object in the right of way, including a political sign or any other sign that's actually causing an immediate potential health and safety hazard, it's getting yanked immediately without calling and warning or doing whatever. We're not. I'd rather someone drag me into court on that and have me say, well, you restricted my speech because we're not going to play that game of, well, traffic safety is the priority. That's paramount here, and that's as you said. So, just so everyone's aware of that.
Steve, to address your comment, that was a discussion that was held by the ad hoc committee, was that they know that current employees would never do anything like you're talking about, but to protect property rights in the future, they wanted to make sure that a rogue employee would not go out and do those kind of things. That's why we have such an elaborate enforcement procedure in there. That was a concern that was raised by the ad hoc committee.
There's another issue on the third whereas clause that speaks to the town of McCandless. Town of McCandless has determined that there are a number of alternative forms of expression available that don't have the negative impact of signs on roadsides and utility poles. What's that getting at? I kind of thought we'd be better off without that in there at all.
Yeah, we had discussed that before the meeting. We're going to remove that.
Okay?
If there's no objections from anybody, we don't want to get into a First Amendment issue here. It has no material impact on the ordinance as written or enforced. It's just words that are.
Yeah, the committee has discussed this very point. Great.
We have here.
Yeah.
We have here.
Thank you.
So just eliminating the whole thing.
So just to summarize so that I understand, basically all we're doing here is trying to get signs off of the public that are interfering with visualization safety issues and to get them up of public space.
Yes.
So individuals can certainly have their own signs on their own property, 3 feet back, but like the medians that we're talking about along with Knight Road, some of those things like that is what we're trying to cut down on some of the litters and the things that are left. Is that just a summary about what
It
this
does,
is about?
and I think that the moving forward of this ordinance will raise awareness for everyone in general of the importance of being responsible when you're placing signs.
Just
other
from a
restriction-
measurement, I'll just take a second, if I may, or.
Sure, of course.
Thank you. The measurement from the cartway, there was some discussion just a few moments ago that the measurement doesn't occur where the asphalt comes up to the grass, but rather it goes where the flat surface, so to speak, ends.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
curb, what I might call a curb.
Yes.
Now, doesn't measuring 3 feet from the end of the cartway going to go beyond the sidewalk? I mean, the sidewalk is, if you measure 3 feet, you're going to end up in the middle of the sidewalk frequently.
Yes. And clearly, we have an ordinance that requires people to keep their sidewalks free of, of objects and snow, for instance, and ice. We have that already codified. So
Not plant
that
your
covers it.
azaleas in your sidewalk.
Well, that's, I mean, but you're
Or your
you're by
signs.
definition going to be pushed back into
On the
your
other side of the
property.
sidewalk.
Right.
Again, to create that safe pedestrian. Very good.
I mean, that's clearly the intent. I
It is,
realize
yes,
that,
sir.
yeah.
And I think we're covered under the legislation.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is we are also eliminating any signs on utility poles or structures that are anywhere in the public right of way. So that could be, a We Buy Ugly Houses sign that's on a telephone pole 6 or 7 feet in, but that's also in violation.
Yeah.
And just, counsel, I just want to ask one question because I'm glad you mentioned that. what about these signs? You see a proliferation of signs, and I must confess, the ones I've observed are not in McCandless, but say going on South Montour, that, you know, down there behind the villa, there's a lot of no hunting, no trespassing signs. I mean, like, probably literally scores of them, maybe even more than that. Put them on trees. Is that covered by this ordinance?
Only if they're within the public right of way. So most of those you generally see are going to be beyond the 5 to 10 feet.
If you're
that's
beyond that
right of way.
measurement, just
Right.
go.
We're not messing with anything
Put your
that
no
far into
trespassing
private
signs
property.
up. Okay. Right. Thank you.
What about, because this was asked by a realtor, how many realtors rely on their signs for open houses in particular?
It's got to be 3 feet off the carpet. That's not a huge burden, I don't think.
Right, but it's, I mean,
We can't make.
you're basically putting it into somebody's true yard where these realtors would not normally have normally would not knock on someone's door and say, hey, I'm trying to sell a house 3 blocks away. Can I put this sign here? I would think a temporary, because those signs are typically up for, 3 hours. They're 1 to 4 or so, the open houses.
If our stated interest in here is to make sure that we keep those areas clear, I don't think that we could go ahead and make sort of exceptions for temporary signs, because that sort of flies in the face of our whole objective. Why is it safe to have a sign there for a few hours rather than? So I think that's the policy. You're right. That's the policy decision. Those will be eliminated. We can't make any exceptions based on the type of sign, what it's being used for. It's got to be, essentially, it's an object in the right of way, and we're trying to eliminate those.
It does seem like this will actually hurt potential sales of homes or realtors' ability to sell a home.
They'll just have to pay for their advertising.
Yeah, I don't. But people
We
don't.
can't discriminate. That's the problem. You can't discriminate, because if you say this person can and these people can't, then you're discriminating. So it has to be.
I would be happy to discuss with the Board of Realtors this ordinance and see if they would have a concern, or if it imposes some type of unreasonable restriction on their activities, if this council would like, before
I mean, I have
forward.
Have had concerns about this and about garage sales in particular. That, I get saying we're having a garage sale on Saturday, and then leaving it up for 4 weeks. That's a problem. But I mean, that's how people get people to their house for the garage sales. Most people are not reading the newspaper to say, oh, this house is open on Saturday, this one is having a garage sale on Saturday.
So are we saying then, what you're saying, the realtor, if they were coming into the development where I live, and there was an open house, and they put a sign at the entrance to the development, they wouldn't be
Right.
permitted to do that?
If it's within 3 feet of the cartway, they can't do it. Otherwise, they can.
36
with
inches
with
from
permission
edge
of
the
the
road.
I'm
owner.
talking about this.
About 36 inches back from the
Right,
edge
which
of the
means
road.
that they would
That would be
literally
right
have
in
to
their
have
yard.
permission from every
That would
owner
go
where they
in
put
their
that
yard.
property, because it's up in their yard.
Right.
Is there really no way there can't be a time limit on a sign? We can't say any sign's up more than 24 hours or 48 hours.
I mean, how would you justify then why it's okay for signs to be up for 24 hours if the stated interest is traffic safety? Why isn't it that important during that 24 hours?
I mean, I personally have a hard time thinking that most of these signs are, I mean, I realize there are places where you're coming up in an intersection and you're looking right or left where they're in it. But if you're driving straight down the road, there's virtually no way. I mean, if a telephone pole's not blocking your view, how could a sign be? I can't imagine on my road, I don't think that you could put a sign up a half an inch from the road and not be able to see the entire road. From the entire length of my road, it wouldn't block any road.
Well, that's a tricky part with these, because there's so many, obviously, different types of housing plans, different types of developments, different types of large roads, small roads, the curves all play a part. So you gotta try to find something that sort of catches, the most that you can. But there's not gonna be any perfect solution. There's gonna be situations where you think, well, this doesn't make any sense here. But if you want it, you have to be even-handed across the board, or else it's not gonna be enforceable.
Right, and we could be even-handed across the board by saying, you know, any signs up more than 24 hours or 48 hours.
I don't think that the time criterion will work. Again, for that reason, that if it's safe for 24 hours to keep it there, then why isn't it safe all the time to keep it there? Why is that the, kind of area, with the time we're gonna say, you know what, forget, traffic safety is not a big deal because it's only 24 hours. I mean, it's either a problem or it's not.
Well, then we should be able to, in my mind on that, there, like I was just saying, on my street, which is virtually a straight line, it would never be unsafe to have a sign there. There is no place on my road, I don't believe, that you could not put up a billboard and block any particular part of the road.
But all of McCandless is not like your street.
Well, I understand that,
Is
but,
the point. So we can't say all of the streets that are curvy can't have these.
but what we are saying is, for safety reasons, we don't want signs up, so therefore, we are also making places where there are no safety reasons to have those signs, they still can't have them put up.
It's the littering issue too. It is safety. It's littering.
And a realtor sign is not a littering issue.
If they leave it, it is.
Realtors, I don't think any realtor would leave their signs. I think they actually pay for those quite a bit.
And again, we can't take, in particular, we could not give a more preferential treatment to a commercial sign like a realtor sign than we would a political sign, because political speech is the more protected speech. So, any restriction would start by loosening on the political signs before we got to commercial.
Which the time limit would solve.
Again, it flies in the face of our objective. I don't think we could defend this ordinance if challenged, because, if we walk in, you can see the argument, right? If you walk in and say, well, it's okay for temporary signs to be within 2 feet or 3 feet of the cartway, then how could you make a finding that this is a dangerous situation and that you're restricting them throughout the town if you're gonna make exceptions and have them there for 24 hours or 48 hours in certain, like on a property by property basis?
Right, but I don't know how we could make an argument that this is a danger on any road that a sign does not block any part of the road or the sidewalk.
And there may be roads where it's not a danger, but so that's council's, you're gonna have to make a determination as a collective council, all right, what is the greater, harm here that we're trying to protect?
So you're gonna go and make some of these changes and look into that and then bring it back to us, and then we can decide if we like it or not and put it up for a vote. If you don't like it, we'll vote it down. If you like it, we'll vote in favor of it.
I like the general idea of it. I hate the political flowers that pop up every 7 feet throughout, the entire election season. But I do feel like we're definitely going to be hurting some people's chances of cleaning out their house or selling their house or whatever by blocking the ability to put up a garage sale sign or a...
And I think they could still ask the property owner and say, hey, do you mind if I put a sign here? I'll come and get it when I'm done. Do you mind if I do that?
I mean,
that
they
would be
could,
okay.
but do you,
I think that'd be
how
all
much
right.
longer, how many signs do they typically put up? I'm gonna guess 5. And then do you have to talk to 5 owners for, even if it's only 5 minutes each, that's still a half hour out of your time every time you're gonna have an open house or so. I don't know how many other people would be thrilled if they had to talk, if I had to go to somebody's house to build a deck and had to talk to 5 people or closest to them every time I went, or if you had to, put someone under anesthesia, but you had to call 5 of their closest relatives to tell them they were doing that every time. It seems like it's a half hour is a lot of time in today's world.
Isn't it simply a matter of, somebody mentioned earlier, if there's say an open house or in the case of a realtor or a yard sign advertising a garage sale at deep into the street or the plan, I think the rule would, the ordinance we're contemplating passing here would require the person who wants to put the sign up to go to the owner of the property at the end of the street in that case and say, may I put a sign up here? And then proceed to do it. If the owner won't allow you to put the sign up, you shouldn't be putting it up anywhere with you, know what I mean?
But normally these people are putting them at the corner of the street.
Well, that's why I mentioned.
Right at the corner, not here's the corner, then here's the 2 feet between the sidewalk, then here's the 3 feet of sidewalk, or even 5 feet depending on where we're at with the sidewalk. and then now you're truly into somebody's yard.
As I understand it, the way I understood it at the beginning was, we control the entire right-of-way. But as I understood it from writing this ordinance and working with Gavin, we don't control the entire right-of-way. We have certain rights to that right-of-way, but it is the person's property up to the street. It's still their
Thank you for
property.
making that point. I didn't want to interrupt Steve, but that's all private property.
Okay,
All the
so-
way to the street.
And that's the argument that
So
was
the
made,
premise
that you
that you
should
don't have
still,
to ask
even
people
if it's
wrong.
within 3 feet, they should be asking that person.
Absolutely.
Because it's their property up to that point.
And they're responsible for it.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, hopefully, at least we can talk to the Realtors Association and get their input on it before we get to the next phase of this.
I think that would be wise.
With respect to the Realtors Association, remember, that covers a much broader area than the town of McCandless. So, I mean, you gotta deal with that. It may be worthwhile to knock on some offices and get some people's ideas, but I don't know how you deal with that.
I will seek the input of the
You understand my
realtor
point?
community.
And ask for suggestions from them.
Let me ask this just for clarification purposes. Does that mean we're thinking another meeting cycle then, back one more time to review at the next zoning committee meeting before we would possibly vote on this in April?
Unless you just want to send around what
I can
any
send around, and
change.
I'd be happy to send around the
And then once,
feedback.
once we look at the changes, if we feel like it needs another discussion, then we can do another discussion. But we're getting well into the primary, so I know we're trying to,
And the reason I ask is that, we would need to advertise this ordinance pretty soon in order to vote on it in March. So I don't know that we're gonna have a consensus.
May pushes.
Right.
I don't think we have the time to.
We'd essentially have to be able to, write it up right now, have everyone agree, and then get it advertised no later than next Monday. We wouldn't have opportunity to discuss it at the agenda review meeting,
It's more
so.
important to get it right,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I would rather get it right than rushed.
Okay. I'll do my best to get the info out.
All right, are we up to public comment on this? No public comment on the signs? Is there any public comment on any of the agenda items? Okay, Public Safety Committee is now closed.
call to order the finance, to order the Finance and Personnel Committee meeting. We have a short presentation of the reports from Manning and Napier and Antico Consulting on the fourth quarter investment performance of the town's uniform and non-uniform defined benefit pension plans.
They're outside. Bruce.
Morning,
Who'd you like to go first?
Pleasure of the chair.
Well, there are 2 empty seats, so you both can go up.
Good evening.
Yeah, I think that-
I think everyone has received the reports and had a chance to look over those. Does anyone have any questions?
I'll give a quick review from performance perspective for the police pension plan, from Manning and Pierce perspective. Obviously, it was a difficult year, some volatility kicked in, but as we've been talking for the last few meetings, last few years, we've been getting a little bit more and more cautious as the bull market has run on to a little bit more than 10 years now. So being cautious, having a little bit lower weight in equity helped us out a lot throughout the year as the markets were volatile. So we were able to put together a return that was significantly better than benchmark for the full year. The portfolio lost only 1.84% before fees, 2.26% after fees, compared to
the 55-45 benchmark that we use, which was down 4%, and the 50-50 S&P benchmark, which was down about the same as our portfolio, about 1.9% for the full year. The fourth quarter was the most difficult part of the year, with benchmarks down between 6 and 7%, and our portfolio held up close to those, down just about 6%. So it's not a great year overall, but the year before that was a very good year, up 15 or 16%. That's 2 years in a row where we've beaten our benchmarks. As I mentioned, we were relatively conservative going in, and we remain so. If you look on page 21 with the pie chart, we were about, at the end of the year, we were about 46% invested in the stock market, with the remainder of that, 54% in bonds and cash. That's about 6 or 7 percentage points below our long-term average and kind of target. So that's what I meant by being relatively conservative. As the market fell throughout the fourth quarter, it almost, from about October 1st to December 24th, it fell just under 20%, about 19.8%. The S&P 500 fell, I believe, meaning that it just narrowly missed being called a bear market, technically, but it was a very difficult quarter. It recovered a little bit at the end of the year, right at that last week, the holiday week, so it was only down about 14 or 15% for the quarter. We typically, in that kind of a market with Manning and Napier's approach, as the stock prices come down, we would probably be stepping in and buying. However, we felt that a lot of the signs that we were seeing with unemployment as low as it was, with growth slowing globally, with the yield curve flattening, were signs that we were definitely getting closer to the end of the economic cycle than we had seen in signs before. So we were very cautious. As the market went down, we did not actually buy more equity. We did do some selling in two tranches in October and again in November, where we went through the portfolio and trimmed out individual names that we thought were particularly economically sensitive. Some of the oil drilling and oil services companies, we trimmed back on some of the semiconductor manufacturers, and we replaced those. Rather than buying more equity, we sort of swapped more economically sensitive equity for less economically sensitive equity. Companies like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Mondelez, Nestle, sort of global staples companies that tend to hold up well even if the economy slows down. Obviously, this report is now a little bit obsolete. The good news is that the year to date has gotten off to a very good start. The portfolio from January 1st to end of February was up 5.93%. So making back up almost everything that was lost in the fourth quarter. So sort of back to even. It's a little bit behind our benchmark so far this year, but as we've continued to have that somewhat conservative positioning, that's not necessarily surprising. As I mentioned, we remain somewhat conservative. So with this rally, we're continuing to be cautious that maybe this is not the end of the volatility, that there might be some more out there. I can say that I think we were very close to, in the fourth quarter, stepping in and starting to increase our equity exposure. So we wouldn't have to see much more down than that to sort of start resetting the portfolio. But that's the end of my remarks. Maybe Justin would like to give a comparison to where we were versus peers and.
So are you saying you're looking at buying equities in the future, near future?
We'll continue to let our process run. If there are individual stocks that hit prices that we feel comfortable with, we would be buying, but we haven't seen much of that. With prices now back up to where they were, or getting close to where they were going into the fourth quarter, we would remain. I would expect that we wouldn't be buying much until we saw prices come down again.
when prices come down, we'll have to look individually at what the economic environment looks like at that point before making a decision as to buy more. But typically, as the economic cycle, or as the market moves on, we're gonna have a lower and lower equity allocation until we see that opportunity to really step in and increase allocation. And we didn't quite get there enough in the fourth quarter. Now things have recovered. If the market continues to run this year, and it may continue to run for a year or two, your portfolio will reflect that and will have positive gains. But we're more worried at this point about the stock market having an even bigger true bear market than what we just went through.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd like to know where your bottom line page is in all of this. Because I hear you talk about all these things, and what I like to know is how much money we're making, how we're doing compared to everyone else with the money that they're making. So is there a page that just tells me that in here somewhere?
Well, pages 21 and 22 and 23 tend to be the bottom line.
Okay, and that has on it compared to like the industry or the
It just compares it
policy
to
index?
it compares it to benchmarks, your
Okay,
policy
and
index
that's
and our.
22 and 23?
Right.
Because it's hard to get through all of this, this is a lot, to me.
Mhm.
Okay.
So that's where I tend to start and finish the
Okay.
discussion.
Okay.
Prior pages are more sort of economic overview and points supporting the fact that we're seeing more volatility.
And where are those numbers on here?
Well, this is how much you started with in the quarter.
Where are the percentages?
The percentages are on the next page.
Because then I'll have to just figure out the percentages.
So 1 year number, we
Okay.
lost 1.84. The
Okay.
benchmarks lost between 2 and 4%.
Okay, perfect, this is the page I was looking for, thank you.
And then Justin's report compares it to the industry and
Right.
their peer groups.
I think our reports were distributed electronically. I brought copies if anyone wants to reference, but can I point out on page 15 in our report?
Would you like me to hand those out?
Yeah, that'd be great.
You know, on page 10 is usually where I see your.
Is that where you go? Oh, you
That's
go straight to
usually,
10.
yeah, I go straight to 10.
Um,
Gotta tell you.
But what I want to show you on page,
Or is it 10 or 19?
19, so I think 19,
19
yeah,
is the one,
the
yeah.
summary sort of.
Yeah, uh-huh.
But on page
It was
15,
10 last time.
I think it's gonna be changes that. But page 15, you mentioned sort of the, how much did we make, lose? So this is just a snapshot. This can be customized for various time periods, but what you'll see on here is just quarter and then year to date and 1 year, the year to date and 1 year being the same time period. But it's just starting market value, and then net flow, so how much cash either, went in contribution-wise, how much came out. So for the quarter, there's positive cash flow. For the year, about 400,000 came out of the fund, and then you can just see the return on investment, so the investment experience. And that can be, if there's any particular time period that you ever want to see, we could do that. But that's just money coming in and out, and then the investment experience in dollar terms.
And the fourth quarter usually includes the town's annual contribution, so that's why the fourth quarter number is usually a positive cash flow.
And then one other page, or 2 pages in the report, just to piggyback on Dave's earlier comments, would be page 11, where he mentioned how the portfolio has shifted to a more conservative asset allocation. And this just shows the last 5 years of asset allocation broken down by sort of the main asset segments: domestic equity, international equity, domestic fixed income, and then cash. And you can just see the portfolio, the green being sort of the fixed income percentage, and then the gray and blue being your equity allocation. If you go to sort of the far left, the end of 2013, you can see the portfolio 65% in equities, and you can see this gradual shift towards a more conservative, lower equity exposure for the plan. And getting to sort of the early part of 2017, you can see where the sort of equity allocation actually, sort of went below about 50%, which is slightly below their neutral sort of allocation. So that just reflects the change over time of them making the decision to be more conservatively allocated. Page 13 is just putting that asset allocation and measuring it relative to certain guidelines in the policy statement with Manning and Napier guidelines. You can see they're within all allowable ranges for investments with that slight equity underweight that we've discussed. Page 14, it gives you a good long-term snapshot of, again, this goes back to early 2003, which is the earliest we have data. The blue line just shows the growth of the fund, and then that gray shaded part shows you the cash flow. So you can see that over this 15-year period, there is cash coming out of the fund as you expect as the plan matures, and then you've had the growth. So beginning in 03, about 6.8 million, 2.6 million has come out. You've had investment gains of about 10.8 million over that time frame to get to the 15 million current fourth quarter market value, and then a return over that time frame on an annualized basis, 7.5%. And again, that is ahead of your long-term return assumption of 7%. So that's a good snapshot of a good long-term picture. Certainly, we've talked about performance issues a few years prior, particularly 2014 to 2016 was difficult for Manning and Napier. We talked about that at length. I'm on page 17 to just give you a quick, I know there's a lot of numbers here, but on page 17, they had a difficult 3-year stretch. Last year, or 2017, we saw, especially from the sort of equity portfolio, we saw some outperformance, so they outperformed policy returns in 2017, and for the most part, despite what was a difficult market environment, they were able to add value again last year, so a second consecutive year of outperformance. And just speaking, how did the fund do relative to other plans? You can see again the fourth quarter return, a loss of 6%. That's very difficult. The policy index was down 5.73, so about 0.25% behind the policy for the fourth quarter. Then we're going to measure you relative to public plans of a similar size, so less than 25 million in assets, and then sort of a universe of all public plans. And you can see that relative to those two peer groups, your fund had about 2.4% better performance than your median plan for the quarter. And then over the year to date or 1 year time period, again, a little less than a 2% loss, which again outperformed the policy and also did very well, on a relative basis. The median returns down 4.5–5%. And then you can see some of the longer term, the 3-year, now a little bit of outperformance, and a little bit of outperformance versus the policy, and that plan median return. The 5-year number still underperforming, a reflection of that stretch from 14 to 16. And again, you go out over the longer term, 10-year, you can see there's still outperformance, 8.5% per year. And then that inception number, 7.5%, 11th percentile. So in a universe of similar funds, you're outperforming return-wise about 90% of other observations over that time period. And then Kim referenced page 19, which is just sort of our summary, our sort of written summary. It captures a lot of the comments that I've made, just going over the numbers. But we've seen the trend certainly. Manning and Napier stabilized. Their conservative allocation did help last year. They did much better in the down market than most other managers, and your fund did better than most in the fourth quarter. So it was a second consecutive good year of returns relative to the policy and other plans. So we'll hopefully the trend continues, but we recommend no changes at this point. Was there specific questions? That concludes my report.
It looks like you're doing pretty good. Looks like you're doing good. Any other questions? Thank you. Bill.
Thank you.
Okay, review the draft proposal pertaining to the establishment of the Technology Advisory Committee.
I see. Thanks, Justin.
Did you all see that draft? This was a idea that came out of the Planning Commission Steering Committee, and Deanna Alfonsi has been kind of working on this and putting this together. I think part of this was formatted kind of along the EAC, how we did with the some of the technical things in it. What kind of questions does anyone have about it, or any things you don't, any things you like or
It's like
don't
the
like?
last 2 pages.
Thank you, sorry. Any questions about it, or things you want to change? Are we ready to send it to get written the way it needs to get formatted, to get it started? What do you all think?
I'd like to start. if that's
Go,
okay.
no, go, please start.
So, being that it came out of the comprehensive planning effort, I was hoping that this would be a broader perspective committee. When I look at the recommended projects to start, I see a committee that looks like it is at this at least as written, working to supplement our town directors in implementing technology operationally here. And I think there's so many important, broader technology issues the town faces. I would like to see a citizen technology group take on things like, when you talk about defining technology, or robotics, not just IT, not just information technology, but distributed energy systems, artificial intelligence. E-mobility is a really big deal right now. Electric vehicle charging, disconnecting from the grid.
What part would that
distributed
go under,
source.
Bill? What part do you see?
Well, I
it going
think under recommended projects to start,
Okay.
I don't think these are nearly broad enough. I think that we should press our directors, who we pay good money, to work with the COGS and through other technology sharing groups, particularly the police and EMTs are very, very specialized. I don't see the most effective role for a citizens group to be working in those areas on technology. I see a citizens group working in the areas of e-mobility, working on smart city technologies, and how that could impact our future of this community over the next 10 years, which is what our comprehensive plan's talking about. So, there are just so many really important broad issues that I'd just like to make sure that this is written in a way that the committee, just like the EAC, their focus is not cleaning up our parks, we use
Right.
public works.
Right.
They're working on broader town issues, and I'd like to see this written the same way to address the broad town issues. And I'd also like to see in here some ability, or some written right into this plan, an insistence of cooperation with the Council of Governments, or with whether it's the CMU's Smart Cities Group or CMU's e-mobility group, to look at these, because just something as simple. I think there are clearly opportunities for the town to adopt more technology. As an example, and I always go back to the authority where I've served for some time. We spearheaded the robotics cameras that were used in sewers that are commonplace now, but it was Red Zone Technologies that grew out of CMU that came to the MTSA group, who 10 years ago, who beta tested on our lines, and we benefited by getting many miles of lines cambered and inspected. I think our town should be doing more of that. And the other thing that we're doing at the authority is we have dual fuel vehicles in our fleet. So we're looking at technologies that are allowing us to burn clean propane fuel instead of gasoline. So those are things that our directors we need to direct our directors to get on and work cooperatively with the other communities. This, I'd like to see broader based. The rollout of G5 will be, in conjunction with autonomous vehicles, will be a game changer for all municipalities. And since we're looking out 10 years, we should have a citizens group looking at those technologies, looking at EV charging and how that gets rolled out. As we get more people off the grid, how do we roll out the solar installations and other distributed energy systems, maybe geothermal. So I'd just like this to be broader based than this. This is too inward looking for
How
me.
about the mission statement there? Does that, is that kind of what you're thinking about? I know.
It is, but I'm thinking at the community at large and not the town operations.
Okay, may I interrupt there for a
Oh, yeah,
minute?
sure.
Are we saying that, let's say, the police force or the firemen, they would be a separate group from this broad group that you're speaking of?
Our first responders, that's such a highly specialized
Right.
technology application. We need to rely on and press, as a council, press our directors and our chiefs to further that. We need to make that goals and
So that
objectives
maybe
for
should be
them.
more
I have
extensive.
actually had
Yeah.
police in particular talk about their concerns with this, the not necessarily
Precisely.
wanting the
You-
civilian.
That's
Right,
correct.
that's the point I'm trying to make.
All right.
That's exactly.
Greg, or
what-
Steve,
I've
I'm
had a
sorry.
That's
few-
what I'm, that's
few
where I'm
mentioned.
going without saying it, Steve.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that I'm thinking that they should be completely
need to-
separate from what you're.
We
you
should
know,
internalize our own technology needs, the town to
Right.
be efficient, effective, and we should drive that through our directors and our chiefs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we do need this, and this is forward-looking, and this is coming out of the comprehensive planning group. It should be, I mean, the Internet of Things, we should be looking at that along with G5 and how that gets rolled out into town. We've had issues here with cellular tower legislation recently within the last year that's important. Those are all great technology issues for a committee. And I also think we should recruit people for this board and not just open it up. I mean,
People who are
we have
trained
people
for it.
in this town who work for Carnegie Robotics, who work at the Scott Institute. And those are the kind of folks we need to attract to this so that we can lead on this at the COG level. So,
I think this is not an area that I excel in, so I can
So
only just try
we saying we
to,
need to work on this more?
well,
Is that our feeling at this point?
are we through talking about it right now?
No, no,
Sounds like
no,
we're
I
ending the
mean-
conversation.
No, but
No,
I'm
I think we
saying-
still are talking about it right
Yes.
now.
Oh, I know that, but what I'm
okay.
saying is that our idea is that this needs to be broader than what it is.
I was just gonna say, so what we could put under here is a collaboration statement. And in the interaction with the police, fire departments regarding their need, we could say, as they request, or something to that effect. As something like that, as they request, so they didn't,
and through the council. And so that, yes. Then
Okay.
I would expect those departments to request through our council and then our council to determine if this is the way we want to.
okay. So it needs a collaboration statement with the COG, probably just a general, if we start naming all the things to collaborate with, I think we get into trouble. So if we just have a collaboration
So
statement.
it's part of their mission, you bet,
Right.
to collaborate with
Right.
the other municipalities. This technology innovation is not
Okay.
something you want to do in a vacuum. You want to
Right.
do it together and you want to standardize as much as possible.
And you have to realize it's changing so fast that everything we do is gonna be different.
Yes.
Well, but we're hoping these people will keep us up, because we're so far behind. I don't know if we'll ever catch up. So let's start with the things that we agree with. Number of members, we like that, it's 5, okay? Okay.
Yeah, they're highly, yeah.
Okay, well, down here we said a minimum of 3 with technical backgrounds, and then 2 regular people with no technical backgrounds.
I don't see a reason for that.
Well, it says here to keep the projects relatable, user-friendly, it would be,
Yeah, I see
It says here.
what it says, but
I I can understand, the idea of having individuals that don't have it, they would have to have a tech interest. They would still be somebody who is better than the average bear at doing, tech things, I would think, like, or people who wouldn't be interested. But we
Well-
need this to be so that,
I mean, I think of the EAC and how important it is that everyone there, it's just, there's complementary environmental skills there. And here, again, as I just briefly listed, when you talk about technology, it's not just IT, it's robotics, it's e-mobility, it's artificial intelligence, it's Internet of Things, it's smart city technology, and
so we'll just say 5 people, and then we'll take the 5 most qualified people who
Most
show up.
Right, because I was just gonna say, because we
with
have so many,
complementary technological skills, right?
right, we have so many great people a lot of times coming out to these, you know, we might have five positions with 15 people wanting the job. And,
Qualified.
and now we're saying, well, great, we have 15 great people looking, but let's take the 2 least qualified and the 3 best qualified. Seems odd to me.
Okay, so we just want 5, and then we'll take, but keeping in mind, we need people who can communicate. Sometimes people are so smart that they can't talk
Right.
down, so other people can understand what's going on. We don't, I think we like people who can communicate.
That
All
will
right?
be important to select the right liaison to the committee from council.
Yes, okay, that's right.
That's where we make that up.
Okay, so we're just gonna say 5 people, and we're gonna leave out the liaisons. I mean,
The
excuse me,
3
the layperson.
technology and 2.
Mhm, okay. All members from the
Executives.
town, okay. And hopefully, do we wanna say bonus a person that's a grant writer?
I mean, that would certainly
It'd
be
certainly
a
be
bonus. I don't know
helpful.
why it's
Yeah,
needed to
that'd
be said.
helpful.
Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, we wouldn't wanna, not approve someone because they're not a grant writer, but that
Right.
would be definitely a plus.
Okay.
It's a skill that you would certainly want in that group, I
Right.
would think.
Okay. Once a month meetings, is that fine?
Mhm.
I think it recommended the 3rd, is that on here? The 4th Wednesday. I'd like to leave that open
Yeah,
and
why
let
don't we
Toby
let
look
them
at that.
I would say let the group decide it.
Well, no, Toby needs to look at the calendar and make sure what days are open first. It can't be meeting the same
Okay.
day something else. That's a suggested date, but I'd like Toby to kind of look at that since he has more a picture of the global. What else? Anybody else have any more comments on this?
I don't think we need any recommended project starts. I think that's something we should develop.
Okay,
And-
let
and
like
just-
the EAC sit down and figure out what they wanted? Okay.
Make recommendations to council, council can then deliberate and select.
Particularly if you have trained people, they'll know exactly what to zero in on.
I think important things will come out of the comprehensive planning group, actually.
Okay.
Is the 3, in light of the change from 5 to 5, technical people, does that alter the, on the second page, the quorum? Is quorum still gonna,
Still stay the same.
It's
would
gonna
still say,
Yeah, why wouldn't it?
Majority.
okay.
We did 4-year terms, two of the people would start it for 2 years, so they're staggered. So everybody's okay with that, nobody's problem with that. Nobody gets paid. A chair and assistant chair, vice chair. All meetings are public, and the rest of these things are, just kind of technical meeting things. They have a liaison. All right, so, can we, I think Deanna is here. Deanna, did you want to speak, or, these are the things that council would like to see changed in these, in here. So, I'm sure you were taking notes for all of that.
So thank you very much for considering this. I'm very excited about this, actually. Deanna Alfonsi, thank you for the reminder. I'm at 9326 Tanbark Drive. Councilman Kirk, I really appreciate all of your comments. I actually think they very well capture the spirit and vision of the Technology Advisory Committee, so I welcome that, and the suggestions you've had as far as broadening the language, I think that would be great and would fit in perfectly. Those projects that were on there were just really just very initial starting places and not meant to limit the perspective, but I'm also very open to, I was debating whether we needed to list projects, but it was more so just to give an idea of where we could start. But I agree that if we have qualified people, which of course is the goal, to be sitting on the committee, then certainly we can let them take the lead on deciding which projects. So I really appreciate all of the input here, and anybody else have questions for me?
Do you mind taking these suggestions and incorporating them and then just giving us another draft?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No problem.
Did anyone else have anything else they wanted to add? I think that was some great feedback. Okay, thank you. Let's see what we got. Okay. Did anyone else have any comments on our Technology Advisory Committee? Yes, sir. Please come up and say your name, where you live.
Good evening. My name is Robert Bauer. I reside at 673 Swoop Road. I just wanted to come and say how encouraged I am that the council is considering this Technology Advisory Committee. I especially like the opening comment. I was going to make the same comment, but I think the committee should be more strategic in its scope and long-term looking rather than day-to-day operations of the township. Those kinds of decisions can have a profound effect on the quality of life in this community 10 or 20 years from now. And particularly the collection of domain expertise in these areas to provide advice and to guide the town council in making good decisions is going to be immensely helpful, I think. And we're fortunate in Pittsburgh that there are people with domain expertise that hopefully will volunteer and assist the town. One of the specific suggestions, I was going to make the same suggestion that the Technology Advisory Committee probably will find it, its most important mission is actually to collect that expertise and to find people who are willing to give us the benefit of their knowledge. There are multiple number of different areas. Everyone in these areas tends to be very narrowly focused. So you might find an expert on robotics and then another expert on telecommunications, but they're not going to be able to cross over expertise. So finding that and collecting that is a difficult process, and it's good that there's a committee that will be tasked for doing that. I would suggest that you have a good ramp-up period to allow that to happen, to set about that before the advisory committee has any hard deadlines. I know that the comprehensive plan is coming up, and there should be some placeholders in that. But to do this right and provide good advice, I think it might take a little time to announce it and let people know that there's people interested. I don't know if this is possible, I would suggest allowing people who work in the town of McCandless or have businesses in the town of McCandless that might be affected to join. I don't know of any specific examples other than to say I know that with respect to autonomous vehicles, there are businesses in the city of Pittsburgh that have worked with that city to cooperatively, and it helps, I think, both parties to do that. So, and I don't know if it's possible to do that. If not, perhaps there could be a way that the Technology Advisory Committee could invite people to make submissions informally, come to the Technology Advisory Committee, work with them on a report, even though they're not formal members of the committee.
Speakers of such.
Well, speakers and also people to help generate reports and make recommendations. I do think a lot of these projects, they do require some sense of scale, smart cities and other things. So I think, I know it's been mentioned already, and I want to say it's a good idea that we should be prepared to work with other municipalities on smart city projects and things of that sort, whether it's Franklin Park. I think I heard that Ross is starting an environmental advisory council of their own. So maybe these ways, I think we can leave things open to do some cooperation with neighboring municipalities to try to make it overall very good for everyone in the North Hills. And my final recommendation is just to I saw a lot of rules here. I think, I know that they're necessary, but try to do the best that we can in getting people to join the committee and to participate. And knowing that a lot of these problems are difficult, and they maybe take a lot of years and a lot of attention.
Thank you for your
Thank
comment.
you so much.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I have a couple of seminar and conferences. It's on the agenda. The ALUM, if you haven't gotten in your registration, please do that. The Pennsylvania Association of Township Commissioners Central Regional Conference also, that's new. I just got, that is gonna be April 26th and 27th. If you're interested in that, please let Marie know. Is there any public comment on anything at all on the other items during the Finance and Personnel Committee? Okay. Hearing none, the Finance and Personnel Committee is adjourned.
I'd like to open the Recreation Committee. Number 2 is to update on initial sponsorship program for the proposed fitness court being partially funded by the National Fitness Campaign, which requires fundraising for the remainder of its cost. I'd like to give just a little bit of the background of what's happening. John Bajarski, Toby Kordick, and Dewana Alfonsi are in the process of meeting with possible sponsors to assist in the funding of the National Fitness Association Court. Earlier in the year, they put together a list of companies that they might consider approaching to seek sponsorship. On February 28th was the first meeting with a potential large sponsor. The meeting went well, and they were told that they should hear back from the company in the latter part of March. So we're well on our way.
Good news.
Any comment from council?
Good to hear.
Comments from public? Okay.
Thank you for that update. One of the things that the National Fitness Campaign had also said we might want to consider is something like a crowdfunding site where it would give the citizens and residents an opportunity, if they want, to also pitch in and contribute to it, which could help increase a sense of ownership, help get people excited about it. And the particular site that they mentioned is called patronicity.com. And so in addition to meetings that we're trying to hold with potential sponsors, I didn't know the town council wanted to maybe discuss this for a couple minutes and see if that's something they'd be interested in opening up to.
I think the first step that we would have to do is have our legal counsel look at that site and make sure that that's okay. And then have Toby, we have to run it through the gamut of all the clearinghouse people for them to go, this is whatever. So I think they need to like bounce that first. It's probably okay since it was suggested by the people who do this, but we need to make sure our people know that it's okay.
And I
think
definitely recommend doing that.
Right. But once they say it's okay, then we can kind of look at and see what the logistics actually are of it.
Great.
And then kind of go from there, so.
Sounds good, I just wanted to see that.
Yeah.
If you have any information specific to that site, aside from the website, if you wouldn't mind passing along to Toby, that would be great. If you do, if not, we can obviously, I know to punch in Patrickicity to Google. But if you have anything additional that you get from that fitness foundation, I wouldn't mind sharing it. For sure.
Okay, no problem.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other comments from council? Public?
Hi, Marcia Caliendo. Just a suggestion, and I know that there were individuals within McCandless who raised money for Joy, for our dog, our police dog. I know there were a couple of things, people had community days to raise money and a few other events. So, if we are looking at some type of public funding, maybe that's another thing that we can look into.
Certainly, any group can
Great
raise
idea.
money for
We'll take
us
all
whenever they
donations.
want.
Yeah.
We'll take all donations. Any other comments? I'll now close the Recreation Committee.
Is there a motion to enter into executive session to discuss a potential litigation matter?
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. We'll excuse the public. Thank you so much. That does conclude our meeting. We won't be re-adjourning afterwards. Thank you.